Hello, welcome back to Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences. I see your smile, so that's all we always say. We love when our guests smile. That means you must have loved the intro.
I wanted to start dancing.
That's good. We like to keep the energy and the beat and the spirits up on here. So music was a piece of my healing journey. So it's like that music and that beat that just keeps you going.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yes. So we want to welcome Miss Geraldine Crane from UK. It's 10 a.m. here, 2 p.m. Your time. So we want to thank you for being a guest and expanding our platform. We have another wonderful testimony. So I'm going to have you come up and introduce yourself. And then after that, it's going to be me by myself. As I mentioned, Sid is at work, so I'll be doing all the questions today. So I'm super excited. But I miss Sid because she asks things that just is on point.
I think it's a shame she's not here too. I want to be interested what she does.
Yes.
So I'm Geraldine Crane, and as it says below, I'm a serene spiritual hypnotherapist, but I specialize in helping people to heal mother wounds. So they're the wounds that have come from having a toxic, difficult, unhealthy, unhappy relationship with your mom. So when your relationship with your mom hasn't been a source of safety, of unconditional love, that one person that you could rely on to love and accept you no matter what, it can cause deep wounds. And often they come out as things such as people pleasing, feeling a deep responsibility for everybody else's well-being, constantly worrying what everybody else thinks, constantly thinking you're in the wrong, this hypervigilance, which then can also lead to anxiety, and generally low worth, just not realizing your own worth. So through spiritual hypnotherapy and coaching, I help people to reconnect with who they truly are, connect with their real power that they have within, a source of peace that they have within that they often feel has been taken away, but it hasn't. It's just reconnecting them with it. And I do that through inner child healing, spiritual connection, empowerment, and sometimes a bit of past life regression as well. But it's different for every person that I work with. But the most important thing is just to help you realize that you have the right to your peace and you can shine your way. So that's the work that I do. And I came to doing it because of cutting contact with my own mother several years ago and the healing journey that sent me on, which I'm sure we'll explore more in a minute.
Yes, we are. We're going to get into it. Again, I want to thank you for sharing your testimony, and hopefully someone that is watching this that has experienced issues with a parent, a mother, specifically you'll be able to help them once we finish. So I want to start in Sid always starts from the childhood. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your upbringings?
Yeah, so I became my mum's carer when I was 12. My parents divorced when I was just 8, and initially I went and lived with my father, but it didn't work out. It wasn't great for me, and it didn't work out. So I went to live with my mum, and I thought she was the center of my universe. She could be vivacious and funny and just daft, and she could really light up a room, and she was the center of everything. But she then got very physically ill. She already had mental health illnesses, nothing that ever got clearly diagnosed because she wouldn't really work with the people that could diagnose it. So there wasn't much support around. And at 12 years old, I became that support. It's called parentification, when you begin your parent. So I not only would help her dress and help her eat and help her wash, but I was also helping to keep her calm and stable. So there would be times where her mental health would really deteriorate, and I would be holding space for her while she was screaming, hitting herself around the head. There was even times I removed scissors away from her so she wouldn't cut herself. There was even times where I told other family members and other adults to leave because it appeared to me that they were making her worse, and I was the only one who could calm her down, because she put me in that position. You're the one I need. You're the one who helps me. And the reason that I was able to calm her down was because I stroked her ego, and I stroked her sense of, I'm the victim in this. I'm the victim. Everything's everybody else's fault. The world is against us. And it was very much a me and her against the world. And for a long time, I completely believed that was true and took it on. But as I started getting older, as I got into teenage years and kind of wanted a bit of an identity of my own, things started getting fractious. But that got even worse when I was in my 20s. I met my now husband, moved down to London, and started really wanting a life of my own, wanting to have my own opinions, my own ideas. And that was treated as an absolute betrayal. There would be times she would ring me 5-6 times a day, and if I didn't answer the phone straight away, it would be screaming at me. I could be dead at the bottom of the stairs. I could be suicidal, as if that would all be my fault because I hadn't picked up the phone. So there was this heavy weight of guilt, and also this underlying threat of, if you're not there for me and you don't meet my needs, I could hurt myself, and that would be my fault. And that was an awful burden to carry from such a young age. So I developed really serious mental health issues myself. I got really bad depression when I was 19. Luckily, through some work I did with a spiritual healer and a spiritual circle, I started to connect with other people and connect with myself spiritually, which helped me get over the depression, but the anxiety kept going. And I had severe anxiety, had several bouts of it until I was 37. I'd been working as a probation officer. I'd worked in substance misuse. I'd worked with victims of domestic violence, and I was just losing what I thought was my dream job, working with female survivors of domestic abuse. Absolutely loved the job, and everything went wrong at the charity, and I lost my job, and my anxiety hit the roof. But at the same time, my daughter was being diagnosed as autistic and learning disabled, and my relationship with my mother was deteriorating at a rapid rate. There was none of those glimpses of this fun, happy, vivacious human being that I used to see. She was bitter and angry and fearful, and it was mainly directed at me because I was trying to put boundaries in place, and the response I was getting was not good. And eventually it just got to that point where I had to cut contact, and that's when I started on my healing journey. But yeah, it was a very slow progression from being young, from being to the center of my universe, and when I decided that wasn't healthy anymore, that's when things got really bad.
That's a lot. So I don't even know where to start. And I can guarantee within an hour, we're not going to have enough time. So it's good because you just gave me a whole lot. So I wanted to go back into, you had to become your mother's caretaker at 12. Can you just tell us a little bit? You gave us a little bit, but the description of the things that you had to do for a 12-year-old becoming a caregiver.
So physically, it would be, helping her wash, sometimes she could be so ill, I would have to lift her head and spoon feed her. There would be times where, before we actually managed to eventually she ended up with a little shower unit in her room. But before that, she literally would have just like a little divider in her room, and behind was a bucket, and she would have to, which was awful for her. And I completely, just how awful for anybody to experience that. And then eventually the council gave us a commode, which seemed like an upgrade, and eventually she got the shower. But before the shower, I would have to empty that bucket or that commode, take it up the stairs in our old Victorian house and empty it for her. And it had everything, it didn't matter what time of the month it was. I can still remember the smell really strong. And I did that every day from being 12. But like I say, there was also the mental health issues. So she would go through bouts. She went through one bout of just being extremely angry at the world. And she was just angry at everybody. And I felt like some of it was my fault because I was the one dealing with the anger. And that was really, really hard, constantly walking on eggshells, not knowing, even when I came to the room or when I came home from school, what was I going to be walking into. She would share with me her darkest thoughts of suicide. She would share with me her childhood traumas of sexual abuse in detail. So it was very passive trauma was then passed on to me. So I was expected to be her therapist and her best friend from being 12. And it was too much. It was way too much.
And can you share with the audience, because also I would love for parents to see this as well, because even as kids, we have to plan for proper care as the parent, and a lot of the weight is put on a child sometimes, or even adults. Like a lot of folks have to alter their life, and there could be proper care taking. So at the age of 12, being a caretaker and have to go through all of these changes, what are some of the things that started mentally affecting you from childhood, and we know that carries on over into adulthood?
It's funny because at the time when I was 12, I was kind of put on a pedestal for being so amazing, for being this young carer. I was so mature. I was such a good daughter. And I was put on this pedestal, but I would get knocked off regularly. So if I had friends over and was giggling upstairs with my friends, she would complain afterwards that I'd left her out and she hadn't been involved, instead of just being happy that I was upstairs being a child and enjoying my friends. She would, if I made myself a drink and forgot to get her one, she would call me a bad carer, because obviously not getting a drink means you don't care about someone. It was, there was lots of these things which just then start to really feed into your belief system about yourself. Because as a child, your perspective of yourself comes from the adults that you're around, especially your main carers. And so I was developing an idea of myself as lazy, not good enough, never enough, that I was a bad daughter if I wasn't serving and giving everything of myself. There was very much my worth depended on being useful and being helpful, which meant that all my life I just kept putting other people first. And even, I remember working as a probation officer in an office I had a person that sat next to me, was a very difficult character and never really gave you any space to concentrate or think. And because I knew they were struggling with their mental health, just kept putting up with it until I sat with a group of separate probation officers who all said, but what about you? But what, yes, okay, this person's struggling, but what about you? And I literally hadn't thought of it, because that's the way I'd kind of been brought up, is to always put myself last. It's funny because she would always say, you come first and everybody else comes a close second. But that's not the actions that she showed. That wasn't, I was rewarded when I put everybody else first and put myself last. I would get up on a morning at the weekend, still in my nightie, my little nightgown, and start cleaning the house before I'd even eaten anything. And yes, she would kind of go, oh, you're silly, you shouldn't have done that. But I would also be rewarded for it. Look how amazing she is. Look how, hardworking she is. And should have just been, no, sit down, eat something, go and get dressed. As a parent, you should be focusing on what your child needs most, no matter what. Obviously, there's circumstances where, I've worked with women in really violent, spaces where everything goes out the window apart from just trying to survive that day. But that's not normal. In most family situations, the mother should be able to really consider, what does that child need? How do I nurture, protect? How do I let her know she matters? How do I, verify who she is and validate how she feels? And I constantly had feelings of not being safe. I didn't know if my mum was going to flare up or lose her temper or get very depressed and very upset, and I was going to hold that space. And living like that, where she could absolutely adore me one minute or be very angry with it, it's very, very hard to get a stable footing for yourself to be able to then grow from. When it almost, in some ways, and I don't hate this kind of comparison, but in some ways it would have been easier if she was just constantly critical. It would have really deeply affected me as well, but at least I didn't know what I was dealing with every day. Whereas some days she would love bomb me, and other days I couldn't do anything right. So it had a long-term effect.
So it sounds like she was gaslighting you, and narcissistic behavior is all mixed in one as parenting. I want to go back because you said your mom and your dad divorced. Okay. So did being a caretaker, your dad never had anything to say about you caretaking for your mom? Did he know the impact of what you were going through? And
no, I don't think he knew I was caring for her, but she was very clever at kind of turning me against my father. He'd left her for another woman who is now his wife, and they've been together a very long time. But he, when they split up, it wasn't amicable at all. In fact, I ended up being the going between them, which I do think both need to take responsibility for that. But I think my mum was so good at she would say things, your dad loves you, but, and then she'd list all the things that he was doing wrong. She would very much paint the picture of their divorce as all being his fault and not hers. And I believed it and took it on, and I pushed my father further and further away. So he really couldn't do very much. And he didn't know the full extent, because when I finally cut contact, he spent a good week with me staying. He lives in Cyprus now, but he'd come over to England and sat with me and spent the whole week, just up every night till late at night, just listening to me, just letting me kind of say, is this true? Was that true? Did this actually happen? Because my whole perception of the world had got turned upside down when I finally realized maybe everything she told me wasn't true. And it was through that he started to go, oh my God, I didn't realize what you were going through. He didn't realize all the stuff I was witnessing and having to cope with. I don't think anybody did. Even, relatives who'd lived in the house with us at points, I was very good at masking. I have inattentive ADHD. I am a champion masker. I can look calm and confident, and on side I'm going, whoa. And it's so, as a child dealing with all that and dealing with that really difficult situation, I masked to survive. I masked to keep going. So a lot of people did not realize how bad it was for me, including my dad.
And it's crazy because you would think that a parent an adult would just step in and say, she needs to be a child. Like, this is too much responsibility for her. It sounds like a lot of people may have known some additional issues and didn't want to get involved with it, besides you. I want to go into with your mental health issues, and I'm going to kind of jump back and forth.
Fine.
So when your mental health issues started, did it affect you in like your social life and school, and if so, what were some of the some of the things that you experienced with the mental health and dealing in the challenges?
So I had my first major breakdown I was 19. I was at university, and I couldn't even sit in the lectures. I would sit kind of rocking and just wanting to run out as fast as I could. I was very blessed to have a good friend who sat with me, and he held my hand, so I at least didn't make a fool of myself running out of the auditorium or of the classroom wherever we were. And he just kind of held that space for me, but I couldn't function. I couldn't write the essays. Part of that now I can see is also because of the ADHD, but my mother, before I went to university, once said to me, if I'm ever going to kill myself, I'll do it while you're at university. I think the thought was, because you'll be safe and with other people. But all it did for me was make university an extremely scary time, that any time she rang not upset, I would be home within minutes, because one, I didn't go too far enough away for university, but I would drive so fast, so panicked, I would be home in no time. And that was just meant my nervous system was constantly on fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawning was definitely my response generally to those kind of situations. I would just try and give her everything I thought she needed or wanted, so she would get stable again and I'd be safe. So living like that day to day, just when you're constantly in fight or flight, your nervous system never calms down. The anxiety is horrendous. It affects everything. I even ended up eventually with an autoimmune disease. I have ulcerative colitis, which I firmly believe is connected to that. I've had breast cancer this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some connections there as well. So it's massively affected everything. But the things you really saw as a teenager was, particularly when I was a younger teenager, it was quite difficult to go out and just hang out with friends. I was quite odd because I thought my mum was the center of the universe. And so I didn't leave her as often as maybe the teenagers were. I would talk about her all the time. So I seemed a bit weird. And then as I started pulling away from her and started trying to reclaim, I rebelled, and I started recreational drugs and playing around with that kind of stuff, which obviously didn't help my mental health either. I started using very strong cannabis, and that really didn't help. And was in and out of, by the time I was like 19, I was in and out of relationships with various boys. There was one year I got dumped 7 times because I never let them see the real me. I never let that mask down, so they never got a chance to know. And you feel that if you're in a relationship with someone, so everybody was kind of kept at a distance, and it made it very hard for me to have good, solid friendships and good, solid relationships. I never, apart from one friend at high school, I never really had really good female friendships until I was well into my 20s, because quite often the women I would become friends with were actually quite harmful for me. So it affected so many different areas of my life, my study, relationships, friendships. It affected everything, as it does when it's that relationship that's foundational in your life. It's going to affect everything.
And all of this stemmed from the mental, emotional, verbal abuse that you were going through as a child. Okay.
Yeah.
Before we jump into it, because you said you had an autoimmune disease, I just want to capture that, because this is also a piece that we like to capture just in case if someone is going through something or have symptoms of autoimmune disease, that they know the signs, that it's questions to ask when they're seeing a doctor. Can you tell us a little bit more about your autoimmune disease, and can you repeat the name of it and just give the audience of what causes the disease? Is there a cure? Some of the symptoms that you went through, and also just some ways to help the guests to let the doctor know that this could be an issue.
So I have ulcerative colitis, which is a bit like Crohn's disease, but it's only whereas Crohn's disease goes through your whole digestive system, mine's just in the colon. So in that last part of your digestive system, mine luckily is right at the bottom, which is called proctitis. So quite often symptoms people get with this is a lot of abdominal pain, you get exhaustion, tiredness. You can get blood and mucus when you go to the toilet, sharing too much detail, but that's one of the main symptoms. And you can have serious bouts of diarrhea, or for me, it's the opposite. I get completely blocked up because it's right at the end. And there's various ways of treating it, but generally they have to put cameras in to diagnose it and find where the ulceration is. If it gets very serious, they do end up cutting parts away out of your colon. But I've luckily so far been able to manage the illness very well. It's sometimes people can think they've got IBS, but this is an IBD. So this is an irritable bowel disease. IBS is generally an umbrella term for getting pain in the abdominal, and getting diarrhea and things like that, but they don't really know the main cause. And quite often, actually, it's there's emotional root causes, and hypnotherapy is incredible for treating that. But the IBD is actually, they can see in the body exactly what's going on and what's causing the problem, and they treat it generally through medication, which works very well for me. And I've been able to manage it very well. But I had it for a good few years, I would say at least 10 years before I was actually diagnosed. I was just putting up with the pain and thinking it was normal somehow. And I think that's partly because I think my mother may have had it. I certainly know my grandmother had it. We didn't find out about my grandmother having it until just before she died, actually. So it is genetic and it can be passed on. But I also think anything around that area can often be linked to mother wounds and mother conflict. So it's always worth keeping an eye out for that kind of thing. Quite often there's also issues around gynecology. I had endometriosis when I was younger, and so that's something also to be aware of the ways that these kind of difficult relationships can manifest in the body. And the key is to get the medical help, but also get the help around the emotional root causes as well.
Thank you for that. So if anyone is having these symptoms, this is take it serious, and please inquire and ask the doctor about it, because it could be more serious than you think. You also mentioned, I'm going to stay right here real quick and then I'm going to jump back, that you had breast cancer. Are you still going through breast cancer, or are you a survivor?
I'm a survivor. I was very blessed that the breast cancer they found was in situ, which means it's not spreading. It was just calcifications were found. It's funny, actually. I was in the shower one day and just found a massive lump in my right side, and it literally overnight, just, you couldn't have missed it. If I laid down, you could see it. It was huge, and I went and got that checked. But when they checked one, they checked the other. And whilst that was completely benign, it was just a big clump of cysts. What they found in the other side was calcifications. And those calcifications turned out to be precancerous, very early cancer. So it wasn't spreading, and I probably would have been fine for quite a few years, but there was the risk of it turning into the cancer that spreads. So the best option was to have it all surgically removed. So I had what's called a mastectomy with an immediate DEP flap. And that's where they spare the skin, but they take away the nipple, they take away all the tissue from inside, and then use the tissue from your stomach to replace the tissue in your breast. So it's a bit like a tummy tuck, but it's a bit more of a serious, like a severe operation. So I have a scar going from one hip to the other. I have a new belly button because they had to pull the skin down and change my belly button. And now I don't have a nipple on this side. I just have the skin from my stomach. And it was, so I'm completely cancer-free now, but still recovering from that whole process, which was extremely difficult, especially as I got a nasty infection in my stomach, and it took a lot longer to heal. And there's a lot of emotional stuff that comes up with it, but I am very blessed to be surrounded by wonderful people helping me get through that.
Thank you. And I want to ask really quick. So the surgery, what is the healing time on your surgery? Because it seems like you may still be healing from it. I'm not for sure.
Oh yeah. It depends what you mean by healing. Like it should really, the wound close up within a few weeks, and then within 3 months you should be pretty much back to normal exercise and things like that. But mine took a lot longer because of the infection. So my wound only closed up after 2 months. But actual 100% back to normal, everything's right, it can take a year to 2 years.
Oh, wow. Wow. Thank you for all of that informative, all of the informative information. I truly appreciate that, because maybe you can help someone with the symptoms or going through that, or just advice. Thank you so much. I wanted to I wanted to jump back into, you made a comment that you did not feel safe with your mom. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more of not being safe?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to explain because at the time, if you'd asked me when I was that age, I'd have said I felt the most safe with her. But it's only on reflection and doing some regression into childhood and inner child work that I realized I was masking really as a way of survival. That and I certainly didn't feel safe as I got older to be able to say anything that she might disagree with. You know, once I cut a few inches off my hair and she stopped talking to me for days. So that's not safe, you know. I didn't I didn't know, I didn't feel safe in that I would come home and be mothered. I would see, it's funny, I used to see one of my oldest friends, I used to go around to her house, and her mother would always be feeding me, and she just said, you just need mothering, you need mothering. And I hadn't even realized that that was a gap in my life, because I didn't know anything different. And it was actually, I think, the thing that helped me to fully realize that I hadn't been safe and that was still a wound that I was dealing with, was becoming a mother myself, and accessing counselling. I started to realize the things that I'd experienced as a child, I would never allow my child to experience, or if I did, I would be doing everything to make sure it didn't happen again. I would be taking ownership of it and doing everything to protect them, whereas I certainly was never protected. And I think I was aware of that she never protected me from her self-harming, or protected me from her really dark thoughts, or from her traumatic experiences. She shared all of it with me in detail. So one of the ways that the lack of safety used to show up is she told me about sexual abuses that happened to her, and one was at a bus stop. And whenever I had to go into our local city centre, I would get the bus and I would stand there at this bus stop, constantly having the images in my head of the things that she told me. So scared of anybody, you know, any interaction, particularly with any older male at this bus stop. I just had this deep fear of any kind of sexual abuse. I couldn't watch certain scenes in certain movies because it was like it was triggering something that had happened to me, almost, because I'd taken it on so young. That this sense of just not being safe really was bedded in. And I think because she'd had a sense of not being safe, which is understandable, but it was the passing it on, which I would always do my utmost not to do with my children. And just, I wasn't protected in that way. And I think that's it. It's the lack of protection.
I was going to ask, you know, dealing with a parent's trauma. Anything that I went through, I apologize to my kids. We're not the best, but I try to do the best parent that I could be. Right? We have to take accountability. But did your mother ever take accountability and apologize to you?
No, absolutely not. I can't diagnose. And I say that very clearly. I cannot diagnose, but after all the research and reading and everything I've done, I do believe there's certainly traits of being a covert narcissist. And covert narcissists they cannot take responsibility. It's just not something that they can do. The only time I ever got any glimpse of an apology was once she'd had an emotional meltdown, and she'd sedated herself by taking too many sleeping tablets. And I was ringing ambulances to make sure, you know, has she taken too much? And after talking to the emergency services, who reassured me she hadn't taken a dangerous amount, but to keep an eye on her, I went and sat with her in her bedroom, and this is the only time she said to me, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I've done to you. And it was a glimpse while she was heavily sedated. And it breaks my heart, because it's a shame. If she could have let go of the fear, I believe it's mainly fear. She could have let go of the fear of abandonment, the fear of, I don't know what fear, only she knows that, that maybe I would have got more of that mother that I glimpsed when she was sedated.
Do you think your dad divorcing your mom was some of the mental health issues that she went through? He just couldn't take it anymore. And if so, do you think she felt as though your dad abandoned her?
Yeah, I think there was definitely his having an affair. I think the fears of abandonment were already there, but certainly the way he left certainly triggered them. And I'm not saying that's his fault necessarily or hers. I think it's just there were wounds there, and they got triggered. I do think it's very hard for me to reflect on what happened between them when I was younger. I think I was 8 years old, and all I've ever had is her perspective really embedded for a long time, and then hearing my dad's. And what the truth is, I'll never fully know. But from talking to various people, I think it became very difficult for my father. It became a very difficult relationship. I don't think she was easy by a long shot, but I'm sure he made mistakes too. There's two human beings who are carrying wounds of their own. I don't 100% blame my mum either. But I do think her mental health damaged the marriage. But then I think the breakup of the marriage further exacerbated her mental health. So it was just a very difficult situation all around.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that, why I asked that is because sometimes as a child, when there's a connection to the parent, that the child will get a bigger on the burden because the parent left, it will be taken out on the child. So I just wondering
Oh
if
yeah.
your mom was taking that anger from your dad, leaving her out on you.
What she kind of did, she would put the weight of responsibility of negotiating with my dad, and she would put that responsibility on me, and really heavily. And she would say things to me like, I was coming, around Christmas or birthdays. There was that, well, I don't have a husband to spoil me, so I took on this responsibility to spend lots on her around Christmas, birthdays, Mother's Day. Gosh, the pressure around Mother's Day was massive. And and it was, well, I don't have a husband to do these things, but that then putting that on your child is just crazy. And she could have very, very high expectations around birthdays, Christmas, and like I say, Mother's Day, which I took on, which is to the extent now that when Mother's Day comes around now, and I don't have that pressure on me because I don't have contact, it's such a relief. And when it comes to my own children around Mother's Day, I'm just like, it's just a day, it's okay. I try and take all the pressure off it I can, because I'd hate to pass that on. So yeah, she certainly did pass it on in several ways.
Okay. Thank you for being so transparent and honest. I wanted to go back really quick because you mentioned your mother put a lot of her life traumas on you. Did she have a way to deliver it, or she delivered the message to you harshly? Because some parents will be like, look, I went through some things and I don't want you to go through it in a respectful way, but some will just lash out. So was the deliverance harsh on the traumas that she went through? Were you did you have to um walk with her traumas all the time?
I definitely had to walk with them. I'm just talking very, very openly here, but I remember once asking her about what a blowjob was. I was 12, and sometimes she could be very good at being very open about this stuff with me. Like when I got my first period, she was brilliant actually. But when I asked that, she would share what it was, but then share her trauma linked with it. but I find this hard to talk about because of this, this, and this. But then she would, whereas you could say I had a difficult experience with this, she would then go into detail, and it was the detail that she shared. And there would be times where she never lashed out. It was never a lashing out. It was more of a sharing of her pain, but sharing her pain with somebody who was far too young to hold that space for her. It was just deeply inappropriate.
Okay, thank you. For your kids, did your kids ever know your mom?
Yeah.
How was the relationship? How did you manage that relationship?
She favored my daughter. That was a very clear favoring. I remember her sitting at the table once, and she was supposed to be playing a game with my son, and she had her back to him. He was there, and she had her back to him and was talking to me. And she would do that a lot, where she never did that with my daughter. But I think because my daughter was special, because she was autistic and learning disabled, she was like, we're special together, which just made my skin crawl. But she would look to my children to, again, give her a sense of worth and stroke her ego. So, if they came in to see her, I need a hug, not I want to give you a hug, or, it was I need. That was the language she always used. There was an incident once when my son he was only 4, and he'd just seen my father and came running into her house going, "Granddad, granddad, granddad, granddad." He was really excited. And she just shouted at him, "Your granddad doesn't deserve that." And I just thought, shut up right now. I'd got to that point where I wasn't putting up with it. I was like, don't you dare talk about my father like that around him. There was incidents with my daughter where, again, she was kind of expecting way more of my daughter than she was able. So my mum's an actress, and she was she filmed this short video film with a group that she was involved with at the time, and it was her in her wheelchair being attacked by a monster. She looked like her. She didn't have any costume or anything. It was her in her own wheelchair, and a monster's coming out and attacking her. And she wanted to show it to my 6-year-old learning disabled daughter. Luckily, I got to her just before she did it, because the trauma that could have caused for my daughter to watch her grandmother being attacked by a monster, and she was very young for her age, couldn't have processed that. And she was just, I just wanted to show. What she wanted was her ego stroking, but she was going to go to my 6-year-old child for that. And again, not protecting her, not thinking about what's right for her. She's thinking about, what do I need? And they were really clear signs that I cannot have this woman around my children. When I cut contact, I had to make that decision. Do I allow her to see the children? And my husband just said, I'm taking that decision away. No, she's not allowed to see them. He took that decision out of my hands. And I'm so glad he did, bless him.
And I was going to jump into that, and I'm glad that we're here right now, because one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, what kind of disturbance or rift or things did your mother stir up? Because now she's upset that you're giving attention elsewhere. So I can only imagine what the next experiences were. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The things that really got her back up, she got really angry about, was the fact I was starting to heal my relationship with my dad. She'd really isolated me from him. I hadn't seen my stepmother for 10 years at one point. And I wrote a letter to my dad just before I got married saying, I want to start again. I don't agree with all the decisions you made. I might not have agreed with everything that you did, but you married a woman you love. That was your choice, and I respect that. And I realized everything you did because you thought it was the right thing at the time. And I want to start again. And she could not understand how I could do that. And she was saying things like, how can you forgive him, but you don't forgive me? And the difference was my dad wasn't continuing to do anything. He was ready to make that fresh start. He'd always given me the space I wanted or needed. And she never did. But she also caused me to feel very, very distant from my extended family. I barely talked to her sister for a long time. I now have a relationship with her, and she hated that. She told my grandparents. I was very close to my grandparents, like my second parents. I absolutely adored them. And she told them, you know, don't bother ringing her. She won't pick up the phone. You know, she takes from me and doesn't give. And she told them all sorts of stuff. And it was only after my granddad died and my grandmother moved to be nearer to us that I spent an awful lot of time with her, and we became extremely close. And she said to me, you are not who your mother told me you are. You are not that at all. And she actually started having a go at my mum, and that obviously caused things to get more difficult. And when I cut contact, my grandmother had my back, which was amazing. And I'm very, very blessed for that. She tried to get in between me and a very close friend, my oldest friend from school, but she didn't succeed because we talked to each other. She never, ever tried to go for my husband. She knew that was never going to work. My husband's amazing and we are extremely close, but he also never dared say exactly what he thought or what he was observing, because he needed me to realize it for myself. Once I started seeing counselor, I was training in with the domestic abuse survivors. I don't like the word victim. When I started working with them and really understanding all the various forms and different types of behavior that are harmful, and I started to really understand that on a much deeper level, I was seeing things much more clearly. That's when he suddenly started opening up, bless him. But otherwise, he just had to kind of catch me after I got off the phone with her, or just be there for me after she left, or, you know, try and stop me from going a bit crazy. But she never ever tried to get in between that relationship. But she caused divide wherever she could. She always wanted me away from other people, so she would badmouth me to them and them to me, and triangulation and manipulation. She was an absolute master.
So she caused everyone, you were distant from your family because of your mother, until folks started to see the truth. And that is definitely a definition of a narcissistic behavior, is to isolate everyone from you. But geez, you were a child, like going into adulthood. Oh my gosh.
And some of the worst bit was really making me think that my family didn't want or like me, you know. And
so
actually,
she was doing it on both sides.
Yeah, and the actual reality was a lot of them didn't know me, because I never got a chance to know them after a certain age. So that gap was huge, and it's really hard to get that back. Really hard.
It is. You miss so much time. I want to ask really quick. Do you think you had a resentment with your stepmother from your mother? I don't know, because you said at a point of time you went to go stay with your dad, but it didn't work. Can you tell us a little?
And there's complicated situations of why, and some people I don't feel completely free to talk about exactly, you know, what maybe wasn't great and not right, but definitely my mom didn't help that situation, because the way she talked about my stepmother, like, I don't want to swear, but whenever I said my mother's name, or she said my stepmother's name, my mother would swear straight afterwards. It was just like her name and then swear. And that got programmed in really deep. And, you know, she gave me a complete distrust of my stepmom. And you know, our relationship, we're still years later trying to figure out our relationship. It's so much better than it was, and she is a source of support, and I care about her so much. But a lot of damage was done by the wedge my mom stuck in, and the way she all that pain that was caused by my dad having an affair, she kind of poured into me. And as a child, you take that on and just believe it as truth and as fact, and not realize that it's a perspective and nothing more. It was just her thinking, and I didn't need to take it on. But that took a long time and a lot of therapy to get around.
So did you ever apologize and take accountability to your stepmom?
Yeah, I mean, because we go and stay with them in Cyprus, and yes, I've had some very deep conversations with my stepmom, support her around stuff, And I've certainly had some very deep conversations with my dad. He knows that when you cut contact with your mum, there is so much grief because you kind of miss the good parts of her. If your mother showed you some good parts, you certainly miss them. You miss, like I missed who I thought she was when I was a child. And I believe she probably was bits of that. And I really miss that. You miss what, if she'd let go of the fear, what kind of mother and grandmother she could have been. So there's so much grief, but I also missed, there was a lot of grief around what I'd missed with my dad all that time. Like the first birthday I really spent with him of his was when he was 70. I still haven't spent Christmas Day with him since I was a very small child. You know, that's a lot of time that I've lost, and that's a lot of grief I've had to process. And yes, I have sat with my dad and said, I'm sorry, but he has never once said anything unpleasant or bitter about my mum. Never once. He just thinks the whole situation is very sad. You know, he felt sad for my mum that she'd lost contact with us all. And he was just really happy to have me back. And yeah, he's a very, very sweet man who would never purposely hurt anyone. And I'm able to see that now, which is, it's just a shame it took so long.
That is beautiful. See, that's what we love to hear. You can repair relationships. Sometimes it takes time, but taking accountability and facing those traumas will lead to a beautiful ending. You know, hurt can turn into teaching lessons and love and blessings. So I'm glad that y'all were able to start that journey to healing in that perspective.
It's been a huge healing journey, and will be, I think, for the rest of my life. I don't think this is something that will just go away. It's part of me now, but I'm actually, it's good. I mean, it'll sound crazy, but I'm actually really grateful to her. One, she introduced me to spirituality and teachers like Louise Hay and Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer, and who are an absolute inspiration to me. So I'm very grateful to her for that. She introduced me to like welfare politics and caring about the environment. You know, she introduced me to Shakespeare and art and music. And, you know, there's a lot I'm grateful to her for. And she has been one of my greatest teachers. And had I not been through what I've been through with her, had I not experienced those things as a child, I don't think I'd be as good at what I do as I believe I am, you know. And the impact, and the one thing all the women work with me say, I feel safe with you. And I think because I know what that feels like to not feel safe, I know how to make people feel safe and protected and accepted exactly as they are. You know, I work with a lot of women who have various mental health issues, are neurodiverse, all sorts going on. And I take them as they are in front of me, and I love them exactly as they are and how they deserved to be, to feel. And that really matters to me, and I love it. I absolutely, like, I have no plans to retire ever. I love doing what I do. I plan to do it the rest of my life, because it's just so, these women are all highly sensitive, beautiful, heart-centered, amazing human beings, that if they realize how amazing they are, they will change the world. The ripple effect is massive, and I just love seeing them really start to shine and own that.
It is. And I was going to say, now you see why your dad loves your stepmom so much. So you get to be a part of that. So that's the beauty of it. We're almost at time. So I like to end two things. First, we want to thank you for being a part of our platform and expanding our platform to bring awareness to so many, because we never know when we're doing the interview, and you brought out so many key pieces in the interview that I did not even capture in the description. So I'm going to have to edit that before
Sorry about that.
because, yeah, thank you. So, you know, I truly appreciate it. But I wanted to say, can you give advice to to the audience on some way, not advice, just some things that helped you positively through the healing journey, just to help you start, and or whatever you're doing now, just to get you to a place to where you are at now, that has experience dealing with a parent that puts them through the emotional, physical, I mean, not physical, emotional, verbal, control abuse piece of it.
Yeah. So I would say the key things is to connect with a professional who can support you with this. Don't go through it alone. Find a professional who understands difficult, abusive, toxic relationships with mothers, because it is different. And it really does help to work with a professional who can understand and support you through that. If they have an understanding of inner child work as well, that's really powerful. Find a group of a peer support group. Find people who understand, because if you've not had a good relationship with your mom, people who have had a good relationship with their mothers are not going to understand. There's so much societal pressure to honor your mother no matter what. You really need other people who understand when you need to push against that and actually say, no, enough is enough. So you need other people around. That's why I have a free group on Facebook, which is just around that, supporting that. It's also around spiritual connection, because the other thing that really helped me was doing the inner work. So really connecting with a point of peace and wisdom and love within me, which we all have and is there to support you. And the key way to start connecting with that is to get still. And for me, stillness can come through meditation, but can also come through play. So doing things that just allow your noisy mind to quieten down, and that peace and wisdom to start bubbling to the surface, which if you're with somebody who's narcissistic or abusive in any way, will not want you doing. So they try and keep you as far away from that as possible. So it's about you giving yourself that time and space in nature, meditating, gardening, exercising, doing something creative, whatever it is for you, something that quietens that noisy, negative mind down and allows that inner wisdom, that inner peace to start rising back to the surface. And that's where you'll get your power and your clarity of what next step to take.
Thank you. So you see your name, your information running across the bottom. This is where we call shameless plug, where you can share if you have any books, upcoming events, anything that you're doing, your work that you're doing, more about your business to help with resources. This is your time to do it right here.
Yay! So I am on all social media platforms. You can come and find me. I'm just starting up a YouTube channel, which is about sharing spiritual experiences through healing the mother wound. So they're my spiritual experiences as well as the ones of my clients. So that's starting up very soon, and it will be on YouTube. So if you find me, Geraldine Crane, on YouTube, I'm there. I think it's Geraldine_Crane on YouTube. And I have an ebook which will be coming out soon, which is Breaking Free from Your Mother Wounds, and it's healing from a toxic relationship with your mother. And that is kind of an intro into working with me. I am working on a big full book called You Do Not Owe Your Mother Your Peace, which I am currently working on writing and getting out to the relevant publishers and things like that. So if anybody wants to support me in that, I will take it. But that's sharing my serene way of working with people, which is taking them through stillness, emotions, reconnection, energy, the power of now, and empowerment. So follows the word serene. And that's always kind of the model that I work with in groups. But it's always in the back of my mind when I'm working with people one-to-one as well. But if you're interested in working with me one-to-one, the contact details are there. You can have an hour with me. It's just £45, which I don't know how much that is in dollars, but it's not a lot. And you get an hour with me just to see am I the right person? Am I the right fit to help you? And if I'm not, I'm more than happy to help you, find somebody who is the right fit. But it's a really lovely way of just getting a connection and finding out more about what I do.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. We definitely appreciate your testimony, your life experience, and we hope that someone will connect so that they can start the journey to healing. We truly appreciate this. I love to see where you are now because look at you, you have done so much healing. And it just shows in your words and your actions. And yeah, check
You
out
can
some of
see
her
it in my
stuff on
painting. Look,
Facebook.
you can see it in my painting just behind me. Oh, I'm
Right
pointing right there. It is.
okay, right there. So, what is that a painting of? Tell us what that is.
It's just a woman like in connection with her inner divinity, as I like to call it, that point of connection with the loving universe and the energy spilling out. So that's there.
Okay. And Geraldine and I are here to tell you that you can overcome your life traumas if you just face them. We have uncontrollable situations. And unfortunately, when we are a youth and being raised, we go through uncontrollable situations. It's what you take from that to heal your life, to help others. And there are so many people that if we share and we continue to send the message, that folks will be able to look at interviews like this and so many others just to acknowledge that you are going through this and you can start the journey to healing. And we just gave you so many techniques and ways to cope. And one of those is talking to someone just to release and to just to get it out.
And I think an important thing to say is just because your mother couldn't mother you doesn't mean you can't. You can mother you. You can give yourself all the love, safety, acceptance, and love. It's all there. You can do it for yourself. You don't need it from her.
And I stamp her message 100%. And that is where we're going to drop the mic. And thank you for tuning into Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast. Give a big shout out to Geraldine all the way from UK. We have been in UK like 6-7 times now virtually. So this is a blessing. Yes. Thank you for tuning in. Monday, 8 p.m. live. Have a blessed day.